Welcome to AWS Made Easy. This is episode number 120. This is the show where we talk to AWS folks in the community, review the latest AWS news with an eye towards helping you leverage AI and save money. And of course, we review and rate the latest AWS news announcements. My name is Stephen Barr.
Hi everyone, I'm Rahul Subramaniam, and what an exciting week. I can't believe we reached episode number 120. It just feels like yesterday we were celebrating the 100th episode. But time flies, and as we get closer to reInvent, which is in the first week of December, the stream of new updates is just getting crazy. It's becoming hard to keep up with all the news that's coming down the pipe. I guess as they get closer to reInvent, they have to kind of prioritize and see what stuff gets announced at reInvent and what stuff will get announced before it. So there's so much coming down the pipe. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's funny how there's this rush of this has to be a pre-reInvent launch, and then there's a little lull because, okay, well, we might as well announce this at reInvent, and then there will be this big explosion. I can't believe it's the first week of December. That's so soon. It is, oh, wow.
Correct.
It is last quarter
Exactly.
of the year.
So lots to unpack over here. How have you been, Stephen?
So I just got back from a family wedding in Turkey. Just got back last night. It was such a
fabulous. Tell us more.
It was really fun. Okay, well, we were in Istanbul. It was really neat. We got to meet the bride's family and have a few days of kind of pre-wedding celebrations with them and getting to know them. That was really funny. My brother can speak passable Turkish. He was the one getting married. None of the other ones could. But we got along well with hand gestures. And also, we all had Google Translate, and we were able to type things in and then show them to the person we were trying to talk to. And we did that back and forth. Then the person who spoke Turkish and not English would respond, type something in, and I'd see it in English. And it worked well enough. And even using another AI tool, Google Lens, right, for reading. The first night we were in a small town, and the menu was just in Turkish. And so we used Google Lens, holding the phone up to the menu, and it switched it over on the phone, just superimposed the English text.
Yeah.
And that's how we were able to order. And then basically, we saw what we wanted and then said, okay, point to the fourth one down and said, order that one in Turkish. I couldn't even pronounce, but it was so much fun. We had a blast. Yeah, I'd never been to that part of the world before.
Oh, that's really awesome.
It was great.
No, I mean, I think AI is completely changing the game when it comes to travel, comes to, bridging people with different cultures and languages. I remember a similar experience when we were traveling to Laos, I think a year and a half ago, or now actually almost 2 years ago. And again, a very similar experience. We were using Google Translate just to communicate with everyone. And we got by quite comfortably. I don't think this would be imaginable even 5 years ago.
Well, and it used to be, right, where it could get kind of what you meant, but there would be big gaps in the in what you actually intended. So I had a friend who, this was about 10 years ago, he had someone working at his house who didn't speak the language, and he wanted to say, I think you can be finished for the day. You're welcome to head home if you want. And he printed this out and handed it to the person. And then his wife came back later and looked at the printout and said, this translates more to, I command you to leave immediately, and not you're welcome to go if you want.
It's remarkable what this technology is doing. Actually, here's one story I want to share because it's very encouraging. So I know this person who works in one of the factories nearby, and he works more like a security security supervisor or the safety supervisor, and he primarily speaks in Tamil. He has very broken knowledge of some of the other regional languages, but this is a British company that he works for. So while he had to deal with all the locals, they were super happy with his work, everything else. But when it got to the point where he was looking for a promotion, looking to advance his career, he literally got told that until he learns English fluently, he wouldn't be able to progress to, set up other factories or other plants or, progress in his career. And I think it was about 6 months ago, I kind of introduced him to Google Translate, and I was like, Duolingo, Google Translate, see if you can, figure out how to, pick up English. And the guy's been doing it remarkably. He, has picked up a lot of English, and he gets by dealing with, a lot of the, international members of the organization that come and visit and, do inspections and everything else. And he's been able to get by and translate and work with them quite comfortably. The way I think the technology has kind of bridged the economic gap and kind of become an instrument of, change, instrument of progress is fabulous to see. Absolutely fabulous to see.
It's amazing to think, right? When you look at Star Trek, right, and you run into some species from some alien world, and all of a sudden they speak English. You beam them up and they speak English. And in the Douglas Adams universe, there was this idea of a Babel fish, right?
Right.
That kind of smoothed over the plots, that all of a sudden everyone can speak the same language. And I
Right.
think the idea of having some earpiece like an AirPods that's listening and actively translating in real time things that you don't understand into the language that you do understand, that's
Yeah.
not that far away.
Yeah, I think we're very close because it's the speed at which the translation is happening now is very near real time. So I think we are at a point where it
Well,
should
actually, one I
absolutely
didn't
work.
even realize. So, we had to call a few Ubers throughout the trip, and the Uber drivers could either speak Turkish or in some cases, Arabic, and it shows you when you call them the profile of what languages they speak.
Right.
And I was messaging, we're going to be around this corner near this landmark. And I realized it was actually translating what the driver was saying from Turkish to English and backwards transparently. And there's this little note, you could read the original, but it worked
Right.
really well. And that was for, putting my family into a vehicle. And it was still, had confidence that both parties understood each other well enough to arrange a pickup in crazy Istanbul traffic.
Again, like I say, we are living in such amazing times. We're lucky to be here at this time where the world is literally changing in front of us in the way we do things, the way we operate, and at a pace that has never been seen before. So, couldn't be more excited about all the change that's coming. And speaking of change, tons
Oh,
of
I
new
have one more,
announcements
I
to talk
thought,
about
funny
today. Oh
anecdote I wanted
yeah,
to share. Then we'll jump into this. Okay, so I was explaining to the kids because our kids, on a flight, they can watch as much content as they want, and they have
right,
in-flight entertainment. And I was explaining to them how, when I was your age, they had, maybe 8 TVs, huge
okay,
CRT TVs hanging from the ceiling of the plane, and they would announce, "Today our movie is this." And if you had to jump up and use the restroom or fell asleep, you can't pause it or anything like that. And they're just kind of, maybe this is one of Dad's tall tales. This can't be. And then in the hotel, we also had a TV, and it was the same thing. We don't have cable at home. We just have our streaming services.
right.
And then my daughter said, "Dad, this is like the TVs you were describing on the plane. There's no control. You can't pause it. You can't change anything. It's just whatever." Yeah, imagine.
What a culture shock.
Exactly.
Or techno
Yeah, when
shock.
I flew, we had ashtrays on planes. That was great.
Awesome.
Oh,
Okay, so what news
okay,
items
I
are
will put
we
this on
covering today?
screen. I think we should jump into this one in considerable detail. Let's put this on screen. Again, I should just be able to say on screen and have that work out. But let's try this. Okay. This is the Graviton 4. And this is a July article, but recent announcements have rounded out the Graviton family. So we wanted to talk
Yeah,
about the Graviton 4 now that we have all the C, R, M, and X8G instance families. We have all of them
correct.
now, are all generally available. Not in every region yet, but that's all happening. So Graviton 4. So it seems like we were just covering the Graviton 3 instance about 18 months ago.
Correct.
Now we're on the Graviton 4. So I like this. It said in the intro in this article, the decades of Moore's Law's improvements in server CPU performance and economics have trained us all to think that no matter what, we will always see a lower cost per unit of performance with each successive generation. That is getting harder and harder to do. But with the Graviton 4 chip, ARM server chip, Amazon Web Services is still getting it done.
Yeah,
So when this article came out, it was just at the announcement of the R8Gs, which were only available in 4 regions. But now, based on this new announcement right here, that just happened September 25th, they have the C8Gs and the M8Gs. Raul, what do you
Correct.
think of the Graviton 4 overall? What has been the reception? Are we using them? What do you think?
Yes, the Graviton 4s are pretty amazing in that on an average, get about 25 to 30% better, you know, cost per vCPU. If you're or cost per unit performance. So the the price performance ratio is pretty incredible when it comes to these. Um, when it comes to databases, getting on Graviton 4, particularly for all the managed services, is a no-brainer. Also, when it comes to the Elastic instances, Elastic, when I'm talking about Elasticsearch or OpenSearch, any of these managed services that are there, it's just way easier to move them over to Graviton 4 because you really have to do no work. We haven't, I think there is still a backlog of apps that we need to move over to Graviton. The process of migration to Graviton hasn't happened, but now when you really look at the delta, I mean, the performance improvement with just Graviton moving from x86 or AMD to Graviton was not big enough with the first and second generation. But now that you're on the fourth generation of Graviton, the deltas are becoming so wide that it just makes sense to switch over to the Graviton 4 and take that effort to make that happen. Um, but for databases, for all the managed services, switching over to Graviton 4 is an
Oh, like
absolute
it is
no-brainer.
amazing to think of the. Like, I'm looking at the table in this article, and we've gone from 16 nanometers to now 4 nanometers.
Yeah.
We are at the 100 billion transistor count level, and I know we went into a little bit of tech nostalgia at the beginning, so I'm gonna put this article up. So this is my kind of reference. This is the first CPU that I bought myself, and I remember saving up my money to actually buy an AMD K62 3D Now, and this is a 250 nanometer technology.
Yeah.
So going from 250 nanometer over to we're
4.
now at 4 nanometer. I asked Claude to come up with a good way of visualizing that size difference, and it said if 250 nanometers were a burrito, 4 nanometer would be a drop of hot sauce. I love comparing this, the tech. I remember in the original, no, in Back to the Future 2, when Marty went to the future and the kid, he was playing his, an arcade game in Cafe 80s. And the kids go, that's like a baby's toy.
Right.
And I'm sure that as amazing as 4 nanometers is now, the kids are going to, wow, you only worked in 3 dimensions to manipulate space time or whatever it is, right? We're going to look like apes trying to start a fire.
I know. But it's remarkable, one, of course, is the fact that you've now got the 4 nanometer technology, which allows you to pack in tons more transistors on the chip. But also the reason why this works very well for the server setup or for data center setup is that this is a 2 socket setup, right? So you can, on one single board, you can actually pack in 2 of these processors, get up to 192 cores on a single board, and pack in an incredible amount of main memory. So here it's almost 1.5 terabytes. Now, can you imagine the number of, very closely linked CPU and memory that's now available to a large number of virtual machines? And in fact, the larger your machine gets, the more resources you use towards a single machine on that one board, you're probably going to be able to pull out a lot more performance than before. So, I mean, this is really, this is orders of magnitude better than the way things used to be just
And
a
thinking
few
about with
generations ago.
1.5 terabytes of main memory, you can do things like Kuzu, which is a graph in-memory graph database. So if you
Yep,
wanted to have in-memory graph RAG, for example, with a huge amount of data, this is a great way to do it
correct.
with all these cores, all this main memory. Wow.
Or,
Okay. So
or even running SAP HANA workloads where it's all in memory, you can get, 100 1.5 TB. In fact, you can do more than 1.5 TB, I think.
well,
You
that's
can
with
go
the
up to 4 TB.
X8G. Let's pull that out.
Yeah,
Let's
let's
pull
pull
that up.
up the X8Gs. Yeah.
The X8G Amazon instance, up to 3 terabytes of
Yep.
memory, up to 3x more vCPUs and memory than the X2 GD instances. So
Correct.
X8G. Let's look at the details. Go down to the biggest: 192 vCPUs, 3 terabytes of RAM, EBS only, 50 gigabits of bandwidth,
Correct.
40 gigabits of Amazon EBS bandwidth, which you're going to need to populate all that RAM.
Correct. You
This
need
is
that
neat.
speed. And the memory here is DDR5, the latest generation. They are much more performant, and it's yeah. I mean, I think it's not just this chip itself; it's the motherboard. All the other pieces also have significant improvements in performance that leads to, like it says here, 60% better performance overall, and that's remarkable. The fact that you can still extract that much out of these processors is, I mean, it's absolutely
Yeah,
mind blowing.
absolutely. It is a lot. Okay, so we've got the X8G, the C8G, the M8G, the C8G. So X's are high memories. That's your SAP
Yeah.
HANA. You have your R. Now, what's the R versus the X?
So the R's are basically database oriented um, instances. So you would use the RAG, R8. Yeah, the RAGs would basically be used for your RDS instances and so forth. The RAGD would be used for disk intensive databases like Redshift, and that's where you'd use the RAGD. The RAGDs come with, uh, two 1.9 TB, if I'm not mistaken, two 1.9 TB highest performance SSDs
Well, let's have a
attached to
look.
those
I believe it's that.
instances.
Yeah, 1.5. Oh,
1.5, no,
no, no,
I
no, no,
think it was
no. Sorry, that's the wrong
1.9.
thing. Where's that table here?
I think it's the last one.
R8G. Yeah, that's right. The last two. R8GD. Two
There,
1.9 terabyte,
correct.
very fast local SSDs.
Of course, these cost a bomb, so be careful when you use them. But for the right kind of workload, these are significantly better in terms of price for the given performance. So
Now,
it just
one
makes sense to
year
use
on
those.
demand being $108,000. Now, who? Just for the audience, when would you ever actually pay the on demand rate for 1 year?
So you would pay the on-demand rate for a year. There are some scenarios where I've seen people running, you know, massive SAP workloads at the end of a quarter, at the beginning of an audit cycle, or things like that, where they just need to run a bunch of very specialized reports, and you need a ton of memory to do that. They probably run these machines for a couple of days and then shut them off. When you have scenarios like that, you will need massive machines, can do all this processing in memory, and so it makes sense that you do on demand for those scenarios. But for almost every other scenario where you're going to run your live production system 24/7, 365 days in a year, it just makes sense to get some sort of reservation, some sort of, you know, savings plans or something in place that will get you discounting, because it makes no sense to pay
Yeah,
on
and one
demand
of
prices on
the
those.
things that the cloud versus on-prem people come up with is they look at this number, that 108,000, and then they go spec one of these comparable machines. Now, in this case, you really can't,
Hmm.
because you can't buy an ARM-based server like this, as far as I know. But
Yeah,
say if you could, and they'll say, okay, well, the physical hardware might cost 60,000. They'll
right.
say, okay, so 60,000 plus power for a year, but 60,000, it's going to work for 3 years. So look how much better of a deal it is. What would be your response to that feedback?
So one thing is, most people amortize over 5 years, and that's how they kind of look at it. So hardware amortization, they look at a 5 year horizon. Now, yeah, the face of it, it might all uh, look like it makes sense, but think of it this way. Number one, if you are trying to keep up with everything that's happening in the world today, you are then stuck with something that was, you know, maybe 3 or 4 years old in terms of generations. So imagine being stuck with a Graviton 1 chip today, when the world has moved on to Graviton 4. So I don't think that's the right way to think about uh, these these price comparisons. Secondly, everyone who knows how to work with the cloud well understands that you never do on demand in terms of these calculations. If you're going to run something 24/7, 365 days in a year, you are going to get some kind of a discount plan in place. It might be via savings plans, it might be via reservations, it might be via managing convertible reserves, depending on what your usage is. There are multiple instruments available out there. You, in a intelligent manner figure out which combination of those discount plans you want to apply to your specific workload. And then thirdly, if you really have significant usage and consistent constant usage that you know exists, you can also, as part of your EDPs or as part of your service agreement with the product teams, you can actually negotiate even better rates on top of that. So I think to do a simple apples to apples comparison with on-demand prices just makes no
I
sense to me at
completely
all.
agree. And as a quick plug for CloudFix, we have a ebook, The Dark Art of EDP Negotiations, where you can actually talk through how do we do these EDPs where you don't get stuck into an increasing amount of spend every single year. We have that available. I will put the link in the description. And if you are in the situation where you're trying to figure out how do I deal with Amazon, please reach out to us over at CloudFix. I'll put the link in there. Reach out to us. We're happy to have a chat about that.
Yeah. Very interestingly, I just came across a very interesting company where, for some reason, this company, let's say for the sake of numbers, they, let's say, had a revenue of $10 million. Okay. They had convinced themselves somehow that in the next year they were going to hit a significantly larger, and when I say significantly, I'm talking about multiples of new business. Not that they were on track or anything like that, but of the let's say if their revenue was $10 million, they were on track to spending $6 million a year in their negotiated EDPs, and that just makes no sense at all for a company that has 10 million in revenue to spend six out of that on a commitment over the next 3 years.
That's really tying up a lot of capital, and at that early stage that could really make the difference between, say if you have an unexpected quarter and you need to, or an unexpected week and you need to hit payroll, or a lawsuit comes up, or something where you need access to some of that cash, and if you've committed it all right away onto an expensive piece of capital or an expensive EDP, right, where you're committed to spending all this money, and even if it's sitting in your bank account, you're still committed to using it. You can't just spend it twice. That would be nice if you could.
And imagine an increasing spend on top of that over the next 3 years. So 6 million or 10 million is the minimum, and then it goes up from there. It's crazy. So you have to be very, very careful. So I very strongly recommend looking at that ebook. It has 16 years of EDP negotiation experience baked into it. All the things that we've learned over the last 16 years, I will try to share it with all of you. So please take the time to read it. I think you'll benefit a ton from it, and avoid a situation where I find so many companies in today where they've been unable to predict what's going to happen in the future, yet they're tied down with this massive commitment on their head.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, how do we rate this announcement now, taking into everything? We're talking all of the Graviton 4s. I'm trying to find the other article that we had. Here we go, the C8G and M8G. So now we have the entire Graviton 4 family, CRMX, all nitro powered, big variety. They've got links to the Graviton Fast Start program, the porting advisor. So if you're just moving over from x86 over to ARM, you can scan your Python or C code for libraries or dependencies that might not have Graviton equivalents.
Right.
So how do we rate this as a family of announcements?
Yeah, so I would say that this definitely simplifies and makes life really easy for most developers, because now you can aim to migrate everything over to the C8Gs or the R8Gs or the M8Gs. Now, just one caveat to all of this that makes it a little more complex is the fact that different services might not necessarily support these instances right away. You might have to wait. For example, I was just looking up Aurora RDS, and when it comes to Aurora RDS, there still isn't support for the R8G. You only still have the db.r7g right now, And so you're going to have to wait for a little while before Aurora, starts supporting Aurora serverless. No, sorry, the memory optimizers types in Aurora start supporting this particular type. So
And
you're
same
going
with
to have some
OpenSearch,
same
right?
with OpenSearch or Elasticsearch or with the Redis caches, all of them. This applies to pretty much across the board. The instances are available as ROM, EC2 instances, but I would be even more excited if these were matched with all their uh, managed services being
All
offered
right.
in
Well,
this
I
flavor.
think given the totality, I think a 4.5 is still pretty fair.
Yeah, I think 4.5 is something that I would comfortably give this.
All right, 4.5. Congrats on the entire Graviton 4 instance family. Let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about desktop as a service. We'll be right back after this message.
Some tools just find AWS cost savings and make you do all the work. Visualizing cost opportunities is great, but that's not enough. CloudFix, on the other hand, actually delivers those savings for you. And you don't need to worry because CloudFix uses AWS recommended savings techniques. It fixes, not just finds. It's the easiest way to save money on AWS. It's 100% automatic and risk-free. And the best part of all, it works non-stop. Stop overspending on AWS and click on the link to start saving now.
All right, we are back, and now we're going to talk about desktop as a service. I wanted to read this blog post from Jeff Barr, my dad. AWS named as a leader in the 2024 Gartner Magic Quadrant for desktop as a service.
I mean,
What do
this
you think about
has
this?
kind of been obvious for a while. I think, other than in the mid 2000s when VMware was the key player there, ever since AWS has kind of become mainstream, AWS has ruled uh, the entire desktop as a service, market. Um, the performance has been incredible. There have been so many organizations that have moved. The one interesting insight that I've had looking at this over the years is that I found that the non-technical folks are the first ones to adopt desktop as a service really quickly, really easily, because they have very low friction. If the IT folks just hand them over some credentials to a remote desktop, they're happy to use it. It works everywhere from everywhere for them. And the convenience of having that service with whatever thin client that they are using, wherever they're using it, without have to worry about all the stuff that's installed on it is something that's remarkable for them. So they see it as low friction and they adopt to it like this.
That's funny, right? I think it's our
Yes,
almost egos as tech people say, I
exactly.
need it local, right? And it works for them, but I need
Correct.
my local machine, right? Because in a pinch, I could take this apart and MacGyver it and fix
Exactly.
it, right?
So till about,
Yes.
I'd say 4 or 5 months ago, I would find the technical folks being the last of the holdouts trying to adopt desktop as a service. But more recently, uh, with IDEs like Cursor and Replit, and tools like that being available, which are just cloud native, everything just runs remote, and you just SSH into them. You get tools that are local, but actually everything is running, including your source code, your builds, everything is running remote. That experience has been so remarkable that I've started seeing, um, you know, technical teams switch over very, very quickly. And then it also gives you consistent environments remotely, which are not kind of, messed up with all your local junk that you keep dumping on your machine throughout your, ownership of that machine.
Yeah, that's being able to use a desktop remote. And the other advantage, which again, talking about my recent travel, is that you have access to
Yeah.
AWS bandwidth. Like I was trying to upload last week's episode. My editors had gotten the last little details tied up. I wanted to review it. I was on a data only SIM card and had a very limited amount of data at some coffee shop, and I thought, oh, this is actually getting tricky to download the 6 gigabyte file, check it, and then re-upload it
Right.
to the streaming platform. And then I realized I could remote in
Yeah.
to a remote desktop. and then do the whole thing. And all I'm sending is
Correct.
mouse and keyboard commands, and then using the nice, huge amount of bandwidth that is available to me on the cloud. That was the way to do it, instead of trying to download the whole video file over an unstable, 5G internet connection, and then re-upload the whole thing. That was not.
I'm surprised that it's taken this long. By the way, one of my very, very early, projects commercial software projects I worked on was an X Windows client for Windows. It was a X Windows client called Hummingbird, and I was involved in writing the OpenGL extensions to that X Windows client. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with X Windows, when you had Linux boxes that would run the graphical interface, you could actually export the graphical interface to any local client. It didn't matter whether it was Windows or Linux or whatever. As long as you had a local client, you could basically render the interface. And that protocol was pretty amazing, even for that time. And being able to render high quality CAD software and stuff, which leveraged OpenGL like crazy, being able to do that remotely, where OpenGL commands are being rendered to the graphical pipeline. Instead, you just send those commands over locally and you render that. Those kind of capabilities just transform the way you could actually use a heavy duty remote server to do all your heavy workloads. Yet all the visual stuff just felt like it was local and amazing in all its glory. I'm surprised that it's taken, now it's almost 25 years or 22 years since I worked on something like that. And so it's only gotten way better today than it's been, in the past. So it's just natural that if you could make it work 21 years ago, it's just very local and very the experiences with improvement in bandwidth, improvement in CPU, improvement in memory. The experience is like having I don't see much difference in local versus remote anymore.
Yeah, and especially if you're traveling, right? These MacBooks are
Heavy.
great, but they're expensive, and if you lost it or something broke, they're heavy. Whereas if you're traveling, you could take the whatever they have at the local electronics store, the cheapest one, HDMI out if you want to, and you're good to go with whatever you need. And that really helps your security footprint.
Exactly.
Really helps everything. So let's go over the desktop as a service offerings, just to remind everyone what they have. And also, I'll put a link in the description. We had a great episode about a year ago now with Sarah
Has it been
Pepper
a year?
and Andrew Wood. We had and then we had a really fun conversation with them. They're on the desktop team, so I'll put a reference to that. But look, we have Amazon Workspaces, and then Raul, what you were saying, even if you want to do something with heavy graphics like CAD, CAM, you can have a workspace with a
Correct.
G4DN. You have persistent desktop for developers, knowledge workers. You can have whatever applications you want to. There's workspaces pools. So if you have a large amount of people, you can simplify your licenses by having them use a pool, because not everyone is going to be using it at the exact same time. So the idea is, say if you have 1,000 workers spread across the globe. Well, due to time zones and habits, maybe you only have a third to half of them online at any given time. So you can use a pool to manage that.
So one other thing that I'm going to say is, for anyone who still, is in disbelief of whether this is even feasible, possible for their setup, where they claim that they absolutely cannot make this work unless they have a local beefy machine at their disposal, you should go check out a trial of SolidWorks. Now, SolidWorks, I remember this from 3 or 4 years ago, where SolidWorks went ahead and moved all of their trials using Amazon AppStream, where on a remote machine, you have SolidWorks that's running, but it streams to you on your desktop with a very, very, very thin client. And you could run it pretty much on anything, including an iPad or anything that has a thin client. And it's amazing the kind of performance you can get for CAD software. Like, you would think the CAD software is really the benchmark for, requiring beefy, heavy-duty processing to make this all work, and it just works beautifully.
And you can see it from their perspective. They want the
Exactly.
demo to be a good experience, and they don't want to be able to say, "Oh, well, it was your
Exactly.
fault. Your machine isn't good enough." You say, "Well, I don't want to buy a $5,000 CAD rig until I know if the software is good enough." And so you're in this chicken and egg problem, and they can solve that and say, "Well, just use it on AppStream, try it out on a machine where it's
Exactly.
spec'd to the right
And
level."
it works brilliantly. So try it out. I mean, there's free. You can look at it right away. You can see how it works. And I will tell you, 3 years ago when I started using it, the experience was pretty remarkable.
Well, and talking about, do you need a big local client? So I put this other blog post. This came out right before reInvent last year, the Workspace's thin client. And so this is in this picture, this little box right here. That is the Workspace's thin client. And so basically, it's effectively a very low-end ARM processor that can take some peripherals, HDMI out, and the device itself is low cost, about $195 in the US. So basically, a little bit more than a Raspberry Pi. I'm guessing that it's basically similarly specified, and this is good enough to run a workspace. So you see that this is how workspaces can be used. So we'll put the link to this one as well. So this is the Workspace's thin client. You can have this, and you can see this is small enough. You can throw this into a carry-on bag if you wanted to, or you could use your laptop, whatever you wanted to. And then that's all you need now to run workspaces. They have the Workspace's thin client. AppStream. So we talked about AppStream 2.0.
So this is something, again, this is about a year. No, this is more than a year old. AppStream first started in 2016, but I think AppStream 2.0 came about a year and a half ago, if I'm not mistaken. Again, I'm losing sense of time over here. But it is remarkable how easy it is to set up. You can, just like any regular instance, go set up your app on an instance and then turn on AppStream. And so you define the bundle that you want to deploy in AppStream, and then you basically say, here's the instance type I want to associate with it. It will launch the instance for you. It'll set up all the streaming infrastructure behind the scenes, and a thin client can literally just immediately start connecting to it. You get an AppStream URL. You put that app URL in and start using it. You can use it in the browser, literally any browser. You can have a Raspberry Pi and pull up the browser and put that URL in there, and you'll be able to stream your heavy-duty application in your browser if need be.
Now, here's a question. Is the latency good enough for gaming?
No. I think the only use case I'd leave out of it is heavy-duty gaming. It also depends on kinds of game. But if you're actually looking at first-person shooter kind of games, those are not going to be good candidates for AppStream because you're trying to find the lowest possible latency for every frame. So let's say you wanted to operate at least at 120 frames per second, and at the same time, the latencies, depending on where your instance is going to be launched to you, could be in the hundreds of milliseconds at times, and that might not be a really great setup for the high throughput, high bandwidth kind of gaming setup. But almost for every other regular work scenario, including CAD design, this just works. Video editing, yeah, it would work.
Video editing, I do quite a bit of that, and being able to have a full editing rig wherever you go, it is amazing how video editing will consume every resource you throw at it. And especially, our machines are getting better, but video quality is getting better too. StreamYard just updated. They can now support 4K. I don't know if we're going to bring you 4K on this channel yet. I think that might be a bit much. You know what we look like. You don't need every single last detail. So you might stick in 1080p because 4K, when you edit 4K, it just slows down your machine, especially multiple 4K streams, and you're changing the sizes. But being able to do that from like a little cafe in Istanbul, from a cheap little laptop, but having access to that 4K or access to that G4DN instance.
Completely agree.
That's pretty cool.
It's amazing what you can do with these remote machines. And we just discussed these machines are getting incredibly large. You get 192 cores for a machine. If you have to use a remote machine for just a little while every day, you can get the biggest, beefiest machine remotely, use it for a few minutes or a few hours, depending on what you need, and then shut it off and not have to pay for it ever.
Well, and we have coming up, I'm not sure if it will be this, I think it'll be next episode, we'll take care of it. But I have a listener wrote in and asked about, they are in an engineering company and they've been tasked with going cloud native as much as possible. And they do CAD CAM, MATLAB simulations. They have to share large files. And the person who asked this, they said they didn't know much about AWS, but they've been tasked with giving their IT department a list of specifications. So we're going to do a little bit of planning with them. We're going to make sure we know what their requirements are. And we will have that as a segment on the next show where we talk about how you can use Amazon technologies like Workspaces or AppStream. We have to figure out a little bit more what they want, and we will present this on the next episode. But it's neat that there are solutions to this, which can work, like you said, for basically anything but very low latency.
Just extending that a little further, we would love to do a segment where you bring your problems to the table and we can have a discussion, go through the different services that actually would work for you, talk about how we could configure those for you so that it works for your use cases. And hopefully that'll help educate others also about how to leverage these AWS services to solve their real problems.
Absolutely. That is the name of the show, is AWS Made Easy. And part of the tricky thing with AWS is just picking what to do, knowing what to do. And at Amazon, there's 1,000 ways to do any given thing. And they might not tell you which is the best one, which is the easiest one. And sometimes that takes a bit of experience. So we were happy to share to help answer.
Correct. And in almost every scenario where we don't know this ourselves, we will bring in the AWS experts who can really weigh in on those decisions and help you make the right decision.
Yes, absolutely. That is a fun part of our community. We will find the AWS folks who can help answer your question and get
awesome.
them on
so
there.
Please keep your comments and suggestions flowing in. We'd love to hear from you. And till the next time, thank you.